Have you ever wondered why some people exercise magnetic power over others while you go unnoticed? Maybe you have felt that void when she looks at you without really seeing you, when her attention vanishes as smoke between your fingers. It is no accident. What you are about to discover has remained hidden for centuries, whispered only in circles of power where Machiavelli remains more than a name in dusty books. If this thought already shook you inside, leave your like right now, because what I am going to reveal could transform not only your way of relating, but who you are in your deepest essence. What the powerful know and you ignore is that attraction is not magic or luck. It is emotional architecture. In the next few minutes, I will give you the keys to a palace that few have visited, where each room keeps a secret that Machiavelli encoded between the lines. This is not a surface seduction manual. It is an awakening. Accompany me in the shadows where true power lives. The first truth that you should accept, although it will tear you inside, is that what you have always taught about love is a convenient lie. A lie designed to keep you docile, predictable, trapped in despair and longing cycles that never end. Machiavelli understood, long before any modern psychologist, that power and desire are the two sides of the same old currency. A currency that, when you learn to launch it correctly, always falls into your favor. Prince Florentine wrote that, "It is better to be feared than loved, if you can't be both." But what he did not reveal in his public texts is the secret he shared only with those who understood the silent language of power. Obsession is born precisely when both emotions, love and fear, dance together in perfect tension, like the edge of a razor that never ends up cutting but always threatens to do it. Think about the last time you felt true obsession with someone. Didn't that element of uncertainty exist? That feeling that you could lose everything at any time? The female mind, like the masculine, does not become obsessed with what it already has completely. Total security is the silent enemy of intense desire. Machiavelli understood that the human yearning intensifies against what it seems constantly within reach, but never completely assured. For centuries, men have tried to conquer applying surface techniques, gifts, fulfillment, predictable demonstrations, tactics that any woman with a minimum of emotional intelligence can identify kilometers away. They are the movements of an amateur on a board where teachers play with different rules, the rules that you are about to learn. The first day of the Machiavellian process is not to act, but in unlearning. You must strip you of that worn skin, that identity of a man who pursues, which seeks approval, which exists based on its reaction. This transformation begins with a silence that shouts stronger than any word you have pronounced before. Imagine this. She expects your message, your call, that sign that you have always given. But today, the void. Not a hostile or child emptiness, but the emptiness of the man who has found his center of gravity. That there is complete, without external confirmation. This first silence is like planting a seed infertile, invisible to the beginning, but already triggering underground reactions. The fascinating thing about this first step is that it operates directly on the most primitive instinct of female psychology, the ability to detect subtle changes in its emotional environment. When you alter the established pattern, when you no longer respond in the expected way, active in it a state of alert. His mind begins to elaborate theories, to seek explanations, to rebuild the image of you. This inaugural day does not require great gestures or statements. In fact, it demands otherwise, a form of absent presence. You are there but transformed, accessible but unattainable at a deeper level. It is time to remember that, as Florentino wrote, men in general judge more for the eyes than by the hands, because everyone is given to see, but feel a few. The seed of the germination obsession in that crack between the visible and the tangible, between what she can see from you and what he can no longer touch. In that ambiguous space, his imagination will begin to work for you, creating versions of yourself that you had not even contemplated. Versions that, paradoxically, will have more power over it than your real presence ever had. Before moving forward on the second day, you must understand that this process is not about tricks, baratos, or obvious manipulations. It is an authentic transformation in the way you inhabit your own power. The Machiavellian paradox is that only when you stop needing its obsession, you begin to inevitably generate it. Only when you become the source of your own validation, you become magnetic for those who previously noticed your existence. This first day ends with a minimal but significant action. a gesture that suggests transformation without explaining it, perhaps an enigmatic message, a photo that reveals an unknown aspect of you, a question that you had never asked before, something that makes clear that a change has happened, but that the exact nature of that change remains hidden, as a treasure that must be discovered. At dawn on the second day, you must remember that Machiavelli never acted without strategy. Each movement served a greater purpose. Each word was calculated to resonate exactly where it should. Today is when you implement what the Florentine teacher called the virtue of controlled contradiction. That ability to present yourself as a living enigma, a puzzle that she unconsciously wants to solve. Most men are painfully predictable. They build unidimensional personalities, easily categorizable. The inveterate romantic, the incorrigible womanizer, the distant intellectual, the eternal joker. But the human mind, especially the female, feels an irresistible attraction towards what it cannot easily classify, towards which it challenges its pre-established expectations. During this day, your mission is to show apparently contradictory facets of your personality. If you have always known you as someone rational and methodical, it reveals moments of uncontrolled passion for something that matters deeply. If you perceive you as someone carefree, it shows an unexpected philosophical reflection. It is as if you opened windows to rooms from your inner castle that she didn't even suspect. The crucial thing here is authenticity. You are not playing a role. You are revealing real dimensions of yourself that you had kept hidden, for convenience or fear. Machiavelli understood that we are all multidimensional beings, but that society pushes us to simplify ourselves, make ourselves digestible and predictable to others. Imagine a specific moment on this second day. You are talking about something ordinary when, suddenly, you share a deep reflection on life or death, about meaning or emptiness. You do it without drama, as who mentions the climate, and then you return to the trivial theme. That contrast, that juxtaposition of depth and lightness, creates a cognitive dissonance that is strangely hypnotic. Men are so simple and submit so much to the current needs that he who cheats will always find who is deceiving. Machiavelli wrote. But here it is not about deceiving, but of breaking the fundamental deception, the idea that you are simple, that you can know you completely. The real seduction begins when she intuits that there are oceans within you that has not yet sailed. During this day, you will also implement what Machiavelli called the power of the dark mirror. When you interact with her, you will subtly reflect aspects of herself that she maintains hidden, even of herself. A look that suggests that you see beyond your social mask. A comment that reveals that you perceive its internal contradictions. You do not do it accusatory, but with the complicity of those who also live these complex spaces. This tacit recognition creates a link that transcends surface connections. When you feel that you can see parts of it that remain invisible to others, an intimacy that does not require physical contact is established. A brain intimacy, more powerful and addictive than any body interaction. At sunset on the second day, you will implement a technique that few men understand: strategic distancing. Just when the connection seems more intense, when the conversation flows to increasingly personal territories, you will retire, not abrupt or impolitely, but with the naturalness of man who has a purpose beyond that immediate interaction. This movement activates what modern psychologists call Zeigarnik effect, our tendency to remember incomplete or interrupted tasks with greater intensity than those completed. His mind will continue to process the conversation, seeking to close those circles that were open, wondering what else you could have said, what other depths you could have revealed. At the end of this second day, you will have sown enough unanswered questions for your mind to make you an exploration project. As the Florentino strategist wrote, men almost always walk along paths through by others and do nothing but imitar in his actions. Your challenge is to become a path that nobody else has traveled, a possibility that challenges the known categories. Remember, you are not pretending to be someone else. You are allowing you to be more fully who you really are, with all your contradictions and complexities. This multidimensional authenticity is, paradoxically, the most seductive mystery you can offer. The third day marks the time to implement what Machiavelli called the principle of calculated scarcity. You have sown enough intrigue seeds. Now it is time to create a vacuum that she feels the uncontrollable impulse to fill. This is perhaps the most counterintuitive day of the process. because it requires that you do exactly the opposite of what the instinct dictates to you. Human nature pushes us to pursue what we want, to approach those who attract us. But the Florentine strategist understood an awkward truth. We value more what we perceive as scarce, which we cannot easily have. Men appreciate more the assets of those who lack than those who possess. Machiavelli observed in their private writings, an intuition that modern psychology has repeatedly confirmed. During this third day, you will get less available. You will not disappear completely. That would be obvious and counterproductive. But you will reduce your presence to short but intense moments. You will respond to your messages with more delay. You will be physically present but mentally distant, as if part of you live in a place that she has no access. The fascinating thing about this technique is how it invests energy dynamics among you. Until now, it has probably been you who has invested more energy, attention, and time in the relationship. Now, when creating this subtle empty, you invite you unconsciously to fill that space, to invest more of itself to recover the connection you perceive that you are losing. Imagine this scenario. She sends you a message, waiting for your usual, fast, and elaborate response. But today, wait. When you finally answer, you do it with intensity but brevity. You share something significant, a reflection, an experience, a thought. But you do it with word economy, like who drops a valuable gem and then continues its path. This combination of depth and brevity creates an irresistible tension. It is necessary to be a great simulator in disguise, Machiavelli wrote. But here does not simply disinterest. You simply redirect your energy. Not that you don't care. It is that you have found an internal balance that allows you to exist fully outside its orbit. This emotional self-sufficiency is paradoxically magnetic. During this day, you will also implement what modern relational strategists call the technique of mirror and smoke. When you interact with her, you will alternate between moments of deep connection, where you perfectly reflect their emotions, such as a polished mirror, and moments of calculated ambiguity, where your intentions and feelings become as imprecise as the smoke that slides between the fingers. This alternation creates an intermittent reinforcement pattern, the same psychological mechanism that makes gambling addictive. The unpredictability of when you will receive this deep emotional validation maintains its constant brain reward system, waiting for the next dose of significant connection with you. It is crucial to understand that this process is not based on cruelty or indifference. It is not about hurting or ignoring, but creating a space where desire can breathe and expand. As Machiavelli pointed out, men forget more quickly the death of their father than the loss of their heritage. This observation, apparently cynical, reveals a deep truth about human psychology. We value more intensely what we perceive as potentially lost. Towards the end of this third day, you will make a paradoxical movement. After hours away calculated, you will have a moment of unusually deep connection. You could share an authentic vulnerability, a personal truth that you would normally keep stored. You will do it without drama or expectations, such as who drops a confession to the wind, without waiting for it to be collected. This contrast between distance and sudden depth creates a powerful cognitive dissonance. Your mind will try to reconcile these apparently contradictory signals, and in that process, your attention will be even more firmly anchored in you. As the Florentine teacher wrote, "Nothing does a prince as dear as large companies and give themselves extraordinary examples." At the end of the third day, you will have fundamentally transformed the energy dynamics between you. You are no longer who pursues, but who is persecuted, not who wishes, but who is desired. This change of polarity is the foundation on which you will build the following steps of the Machiavellian process. Remember that, at this point, your mind is already spending more time and energy than you imagine. In their moments of solitude, their thoughts will gravitate towards you, trying to decipher the enigma you have become. And it is precisely in that mental space, in that internal conversation about you, where the seed of the obsession finds its most fertile land. At dawn on the fourth day, you will implement what Machiavelli called the principle of the visible alliance. Until now, you have worked mainly in the direct relationship between you two. Today you will expand the game board to include other pawns, specifically other women, not to generate children's jealousy, but to activate a much more sophisticated psychological mechanism, social validation. The Florentine strategist understood that humans do not value things for their intrinsic qualities as much as for the value they assign to them. Men generally judge more for the eyes than by the hands, because everyone can see, but few can touch, he wrote. This observation reveals an awkward truth. We want more intensely what others also want. During this fourth day, you will be socially active and valued, especially by other women. It is not about exhibiting romantic conquests. That would be gross and counterproductive, but subtly revealing that you are a man whose company, opinion, and presence are appreciated by interesting women. You could casually mention conversations with female colleagues, share an anecdote that reveals the confidence that other women deposit in you, or even appear in social situations where your comfort in female company is evident. The fascinating thing about this technique is that it operates at the preconscious level. Although rationally she can rule out any feeling of competence, in instinctive level, what anthropologists call copied pairing bias will be activated, the evolutionary tendency to consider more attractive potential couples that have already been pre-selected by others. Machiavelli understood that power does not reside so much in what one possesses, but in what others perceive that one possesses. In the same way, your appeal does not depend so much on your objective qualities and how you are perceived in the social ecosystem. A prince must show himself a virtue lover and honor those who stand out in the arts, said Florentino, recognizing the power of associations. At this point in the process, it is crucial to maintain the balance between accessibility and mystery you have cultivated. While you show yourself socially valued, you also keep that aura of emotional inaccessibility that you have built. You are visible to everyone, but intimately known by few. This dichotomy intensifies its curiosity. How is the man who exists behind that social person so valued? During this day, you will also implement what modern relational strategists call broken mirror technique. In your interactions with her, you will reflect aspects of her personality, desires, and values, but not perfectly. You will introduce small discrepancies, subtle disagreements that challenge their vision of the world without completely rejecting it. This technique creates fascinating cognitive tension. On the one hand, it feels the validation of being reflected and understood. On the other, he experiences the excitement of being intellectually and emotionally challenged. As Machiavelli pointed out, men must be caressed or eliminated, because they come from light offenses since the base cannot. Here, these aesthetic disagreements function as small frictions that intensify the attraction without generating true antagonism. By the middle of the day, you will perform a strategic movement. After hours of active social presence, you will retire to a visible solitude space. You could mention an important personal project, a contemplative practice, or simply the need for time to alone. This contrast between sociability and recollection creates another layer of complexity in the image you are projecting. Machiavelli understood that true power does not need to be constantly displayed. Nothing does a prince as dear as large companies and giving extraordinary examples, he wrote. When you retire to that personal space, you demonstrate that your value does not depend exclusively on social validation, which you have an internal source of purpose and meaning. Towards the end of the fourth day, you will perform a paradoxical movement. After hours away in social activity, you will have a brief but intense moment of exclusive attention towards it. You could ask you a surprisingly insightful question about something that I mentioned days ago, demonstrating that despite your apparent distraction, you have been processing your words to a deep level. This contrast between apparent neglect and sudden focused attention creates another to powerful cognitive dissonance. His mind will try to reconcile these apparently contradictory signals. How can this man seem so busy with his world and nevertheless retain such specific details about me? This interior questioning intensifies your emotional investment in deciphering who you really are. At the end of the fourth day, you will have added a new dimension to the dynamic. You are no longer an intriguing individual, but a valued social being whose attention is disputed by others. This perception of social scarcity dramatically amplifies your perceived value. As the Florentine teacher observed, men are so simple and submit so much to current needs that he who cheats will always find who is deceiving. Remember that at this point, its curiosity about you has evolved towards something more complex. It is no longer just interest. It is an emotional investment in solving the enigma you represent, in accessing IT spaces that others can only glimpse. And it is precisely in that desire for exclusivity where the seed of the obsession finds its most powerful nutrient. The fifth day marks the implementation of what Machiavelli called the beginning of the inner mirror. Until now, you have mainly manipulated external perceptions, how you see you, how you relate to others, how you manage emotional distance. Today, you will penetrate a much more intimate territory, itself, concept, the image of itself. The Florentine strategist understood that humans do not move both for what they want to get and who they want to be. Men generally judge more for the eyes than for intelligence because everyone can see, but few understand what they see. He wrote, revealing that our decisions are more influenced by identity than by rationality. During this fifth day, you will become a mirror that reflects not who is currently, but who secretly aspires to be. Through apparently casual conversations, you will identify your deepest aspirations, your idealized versions of yourself, and subtly show you that you already see her as that person who longs to become. This technique operates at the almost subconscious level. When someone makes us feel the idealized version of ourselves, we develop an emotional addiction to their presence. It is not superficial adulation that you will offer. The cheap compliments are transparent and counterproductive. It is a deep recognition of potentialities that perhaps neither she dares to claim fully. Imagine this scenario. In a conversation, you casually mention a quality that you have observed in it, perhaps an acute intuition, an unusual compassion, a unique perspective on some subject. You do it not as a compliment, but as an objective observation, like who simply names something obvious. It is interesting how you immediately capture emotional dynamics in a situation, almost as if you had an internal radar for truth under appearances. The powerful thing about this technique is that you are not inventing qualities, but identifying and amplifying real talents and virtues that it possesses, but that perhaps are underdeveloped or undervalued by itself. As Machiavelli pointed out, nothing provides a prince with as much estimate as large companies and giving themselves extraordinary examples. Here, you are showing your own potential large companies. During this day, you will also implement what modern relational strategists call the technique of identity paradox. In deeper conversations, you will respectfully point out the contradictions within their own personality, not as criticism, but as fascinating complexities that make it unique. This technique creates extraordinary intellectual and emotional intimacy by demonstrating that you can see both their lights and their shadows, that you understand the contradictions that inhabit it without judging them. You establish a level of understanding that few people in their lives will have achieved. As Machiavelli observed, men offend more often those who love who fear, suggesting that true intimacy requires the ability to see the imperfect without rejecting it. By the middle of the day, you will perform a strategic movement. After these deep exchanges, you will change abruptly towards almost carefree lightness, as if you had briefly opened a door to a sacred space and then close it gently. This contrast between depth and lightness creates another layer of intrigue. How many more of these doors exist in you? What other spaces for deep comprehension live? Machiavelli understood that the most durable power is not based on force, but on understanding. The one who conquers should not mistreat the people if they want to possess it peacefully, he wrote, recognizing that true influence arises from knowing intimately those about whom he wants to have power. Towards the end of the fifth day, you will perform a seemingly contradictory movement. After hours of psychological depth, you will ask a surprisingly simple and direct question about it. Not a deep or philosophical question, but something everyday but specific, something that reveals your attention to details that others would ignore. This contrast between complexity and simplicity creates another fascinating cognitive dissonance. Your mind will try to reconcile how you can move so fluently between such diverse levels of connection, how you can be simultaneously deep and light, complex and simple. At the end of the fifth day, you will have established a radically different form of intimacy from the one it has experienced before. It is not an intimacy based on shared time or traditional mutual vulnerabilities, but on an existential recognition. You have shown him that you can see not only who it is, but who aspires to be, who fears being, who could be. This type of being seen transcends conventional attraction and penetrates an almost spiritual territory. As the Florentine strategist, a prudent prince must to use beasts and choose between them the fox and the lion, because the lion does not know how to defend against the traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from the wolves. Here, you have combined the cunning of the fox to recognize its internal complexities with the strength of the lion to sustain that knowledge without being overwhelmed by him. Remember that at this point, your relationship with you is no longer merely emotional or intellectual, but identity. You have become a mirror in which it is not only reflected, but revealed. And it is precisely in that space of revelation where the seed of the obsession finds its deepest expression. It is not so much that I cannot stop thinking about you, but that it cannot completely think of itself without reference to how you perceive it. The sixth day displays what Machiavelli called the principle of power investment. Until now, although you have implemented sophisticated strategies, the fundamental dynamic remained predictable. You as a persecutor, she as a goal. Today, you will completely invest this equation, creating a psychological dislocation that will be irresistibly hypnotic. The Florentine strategist understood that true power does not reside in possession of something, but in the ability to get away from it. A prudent prince cannot and should not fulfill his word when such observance goes against his interests, he wrote, recognizing that freedom of action is the very essence of real power. During the sixth day, you will implement a strategic withdrawal. Not a complete disappearance or a hostile distancing, but something much more sophisticated. The subtle revelation that, while she has been evaluating her interest in you, you have been doing the same with her, and that your conclusions are not entirely favorable. This technique operates at the deep identity level. When someone who attracts us suggests that perhaps we are not enough for them, an almost essential compulsion of demonstrating our value is activated. It is not emotional manipulation that you will implement, but an honest mutual evaluation that defies the unidirectional narrative that usually dominates the dynamics of attraction. Imagine this scenario. In a conversation, you chance an observation about something that makes you question your compatibility. Perhaps a value that you consider fundamental and that you perceive weak in it, or a characteristic of its way of relating that generates genuine concern. You express not as a criticism or an ultimatum, but as a personal reflection, as the one who simply articulates an uncomfortable truth that has been considering. I have been thinking about how you answer when you face adversities. I have realized that I tend to connect deeply with people who transform their difficulties into strengths. And sometimes I wonder if you and I see that process fundamentally differently. The powerful thing about this technique is that you are not manufacturing artificial concerns, but expressing authentic doubts based on real observations. As Machiavelli pointed out, men are so simple and obey so much to the needs of the moment that he who cheats will always find who is deceiving. Here, paradoxically, it is your honesty that creates the most irresistible tension. During this day, you will also implement what modern relational strategists call the inaccessible value technique. You will reveal, not through explicit statements, but through casual comments and consistent actions, a fundamental aspect of your value system that she does not fully satisfy. You do not present it as a requirement to gain your affection, but as an unnegotiable part of who you are. This technique creates an extraordinary existential tension. On the one hand, feel a power connection dare with you. On the other, perceive that there is a space within you that cannot be fully accessing without transforming in some way. As Machiavelli observed, men offend more often those who love those who fear, suggesting that true character tests occur precisely in these points of valuation friction. By the middle of the day, you will perform a strategic movement. After sowing these subtle doubts, you will show a moment of genuine appreciation for a quality that you really value. This contrast between questioning and affirmation creates another layer of emotional complexity. What is the true nature of your feelings towards it? What will finally prevail, attraction or doubt? Machiavelli understood that the most sophisticated power operates through these unresolved tensions. A prince should know how to use the beast in man correctly, he wrote, recognizing that the deepest influence arises from keeping a certain ambiguity between apparent contradictions. Toward the end of the sixth day, you will perform a paradoxical movement. After hours of subtle questioning, you will have a moment of unusually warm and present connection. Not necessarily an explicit romantic connection, but an instant of genuine tune where defenses fall momentarily and there is mutual recognition of being. This contrast between doubt and connection creates the most powerful cognitive dissonance until now. Your mind will try to reconcile how you can feel simultaneously that you are losing and winning, how you can perceive withdrawal and approach signals. In this paradoxical space, the seed of the obsession finds its most intense expression. At the end of the 6th day, you will have fundamentally transformed the dynamics between you. You are no longer the one who wants to get something from her, but who must be convinced of what she offers. This radical change of polarity triggers a primary psychological mechanism, the need for existential validation. As the Florentine strategist pointed out, men in general judge more for eyes than for intelligence, because everyone can see but few understand what they see. At this point, she not only sees you and wishes you, but she needs to demonstrate herself and you who are worthy of the space she occupies in your world. Remember that at this stage, your relationship with you has transcended the merely emotional or physical to become existential. You have become an object of desire that you want, a goal to pursue an evaluator who judges. And it is precisely in this Copernican turn where the seed of the obsession finds its most complete expression. It is not so much that I cannot stop thinking about you, but cannot stop trying to prove and demonstrate that deserves to occupy a central place in your universe. We have reached the 7th day, where the Machiavellian circle closes as a scalpel that cuts right in the line where desire becomes necessity. At this point, you are no longer an option for her. You have become a mirror where he desperately looks for his reflection. What many will never understand is that the true obsession is not born to pursue, but to create a void that the other needs to fill with its own essence. Do you feel power now? It is not the gross power of superficial manipulation. It is the refined power of having become the silent architect of his emotional labyrinth. Every step that is taken these 7 days has apparently for its will, but following the invisible map that you traces with the precision of a Florentine strategist. If you have really understood the depth of this method, you will know that her obsession is not with your person, but with whom she becomes when she is with you. That is the true Machiavellian mastery. He comments, "Power is never given, it is always taken, and we will continue this trip to the shadows where control and desire dance their eternal dance, because what we have revealed today is just the first camera of a palace of secrets that few dare to visit."